So welcome once again. I would like to thank you for being here. This session is about the what questions to ask during the mid-year appraisal. My name is Johan. It's a short session, but an important session because mid-year reviews is an important component of the performance management cycle. Many employees just see it as something that has to be done and don't really see the value in that. But with what I'm going to be sharing with you, it will probably give you a bit better perspective and make you understand that there are some benefits if you ask the right questions and if you really see the value of the mid-year review. Before I continue, may I just ask you to, in the chat box, just indicate which company you are from. Just send me in the chat box which company you are from. Dubai Silicon Oasis, great, thank you. Alalia Group, okay, who else is there? Dubai Silicon Oasis, great. Thank you for that. Select's providing a lot of interesting courses on social media. If you go to the YouTube, you'll find videos about project management, interpersonal skills, etc. Please feel free to visit those sites and have a look at what we have to offer, and you can learn on your own time. To get the most out of this session, you basically, I think you're all aware that you can show your face if you would like to do that. It's always nice to see a face. We're so used to talking to screens these days. Please put your mobile on silent and put it away from the computer. If you are listening, just mute yourself. Otherwise, there's going to be a background noises. Otherwise, I'll just mute you. These are the settings you can use. And then you can also have reactions. I've got the chat box in front of me, and I can see if there are any reactions. You just click on that, thumbs up or whatever. At the end of the session, you will get a confirmation email that you've attended the session, but please, you first need to do the poll that I will launch at the end of the session. If you want to change your view, you can just go to the gallery view at the top on the right-hand corner. And then it is very nice to have you with us, and I hope you really enjoy the session this afternoon, but keep in mind that the material is copyrighted, so don't take recordings or photos. If you want to share with other people that you're attending the session, you are welcome, but please do not share any material that's being shared. Okay. I compile a quick poll, and all I need you to do is just answer the questions in the chat box. Kindly provide your answers to the following questions. You can just look at the question and provide the answer in the chat box as you did with your location. The first question is, does your company require you to conduct mid-year appraisal reviews as part of the performance management process? And you can just type in a Y or an N. Okay, we've got 2 Ys and 1 N. The second one, what is the purpose of the mid-year appraisal in your company? A, it forms part of the performance management system. B, managers, supervisors are required to do it to ensure employees receive performance ratings. And C, to measure progress with objectives. Just post your answer in the chat box. I've only got one answer. Anyone else? Just check that. Okay, and then the last question. How comfortable do you feel about mid-year appraisals? A, not at all, B, somewhat, and C, very comfortable. Okay, great. Now, the purpose of the session is just to give you some hints on why this is important, a process in the first place. What is the purpose? So that we have an understanding from the employees and the organization's perspective. Now, the system normally is fine, but it's how the system is implemented. So we need to be aware that It's only people that can make the system work. And depending on your experiences in performance management, you may have had positive experiences or negative experiences. And normally when it's been negative, you probably will be reluctant to go into a mid-year review. It's a good practice, it's best practice to at least have a mid-year review. Although performance appraisal is a continuous process that should take place on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to avoid surprises at the end of the year when it gets to the final appraisal. So that's a very important thing. And if it's not happening in your company as part of the performance management process, I suggest that you informally arrange with your manager or supervisor that you can have sessions just to discuss how you are doing, to make sure that you know where you stand and what you need to improve. Otherwise, you may get surprises. All right? Now, the first question is, what is the purpose of the mid-year appraisal? Apart from the fact that we need to get the ratings done and the system requires it, it's important for us as employees to have a different perspective, not to see this as something that's being forced on us, but rather consider it as something that can add value to the organization, because we should be grateful to be working for the organization. And if we understand that it has a purpose and it is important, we may have a different perspective on how we approach the performance appraisal. The first reason is to determine the progress with performance objectives. In a normal, good system, objectives need to be set at the beginning of the year, clarified between the supervisor and the employee. If it's not happening, once again, I encourage you to do so in an informal discussion with your supervisor or manager. And once again, as I said, it depends on who your supervisor or manager is. That will make it comfortable or more uncomfortable. But don't let that demotivate you in any way. The second reason is to provide positive feedbacks for the things that you are doing well and constructive feedback on the areas where performance can be improved. That will help you to make sure that you are on track and make sure that you make the required changes before the end of the year in order to improve performance where required. The third reason is to identify corrective actions and eliminate possible barriers. You don't want surprises. If you have an opportunity to discuss it with your supervisor or manager in advance, you will avoid mistakes that may come your way. Also, the organization is very dynamic these days. Things are changing from day to day, and it may be that objectives are also changing, and it's an opportunity for you to identify what needs to be changed, what objectives need to be rephrased, or dates or milestones need to be changed. The other aspect that's normally not really given much attention is development needs. It's an excellent opportunity to go and discuss your personal development needs, and I'll elaborate a little bit more about that. And then provide a time for exchange of ideas. In a constructive discussion about performance, once you get into a discussion, you will discover that there may be some new ideas coming out of the tasks and activities you discuss with your supervisor or manager that may give you new ideas on how to tackle the objectives and do it more effectively. So these are just pointers to give you a perspective that performance management and the purpose of this appraisal is important. It's not just something that needs to happen. All of these factors contribute to the success of your performance and of the organization. Why is it important? By giving people feedback, they know what they are supposed to be doing and when they should be doing it. And they can also determine whether their goals and objectives are aligned to the organizational goals and objectives, to prevent them from doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. By having the team on the same page, giving them feedback about where they stand in terms of milestones, everybody knows that they are working towards the same goal. Welcome, Ward. Feedback helps form better relationships. Once we start talking about performance, and I want to take it a step further, not only in a performance discussion, but also as teams around the table, We build better relationships because we find out where we can complement one another. So it's important to know the skills of your other team members in order to determine who can help who in which situations. And if it's done in the right way, it motivates people. Now, unfortunately, we all have a blue script of feedback that was given in a wrong way and may have had negative experiences. We shouldn't be held back by those experiences. We should have a positive blueprint for performance discussions and take what I'll be giving you today as a basis to have a better approach in the future. Feedback promotes personal professional growth. By knowing where you're doing well and where you're not doing well, and know in which areas you need to improve, can only help you to improve the skills and help you to grow professionally. So that's another important aspect of feedback. And then feedback produces business-related direct benefits. By knowing that you are on track, that you are delivering the results based on the requirements of the department, you also contribute towards the divisional objectives, and you also contribute overall to the organizational objectives, which may be profitability, efficiency, customer service, whatever company you are working for. So the one-on-one discussions that take place at the lower end of the organization ensures that goals are cascaded to the right level and that people are working towards the same benefits of the organization, because that's what we are working for. We're working for the organization, not for our manager or our supervisor. Now, benefits of feedback on the individual level. If you think about it, if somebody gives you feedback, there are some benefits. It makes you aware of the things that you need to change to get better results. And I'm talking about constructive feedback. I'm not talking about criticism. So it's also important to know that you are receiving it in a constructive way. The rate of progress towards the goal. So it will give you an indication on whether you are going to meet the goals on time or whether you need to change things or make it more effective, the actions that you take in order to progress towards your goals. Obviously, we're all working in one organization. There are other people that depend on our contributions. And by getting feedback from your supervisor and even your team members, it gives you an opportunity of identifying what you need to do to improve your relationship and your teamwork with your colleagues. We sometimes do things that are not necessary. Feedback gives us feedback, or feedback gives us focus on the things that needs to be done and whether it's aligned to the organizational goals, objectives. We need to ensure that we are keeping ourselves busy with things that are worth doing. And then, of course, it's about how well are we doing? Are we performing to the level required? And typically there, you would want a performance management system that provides ratings that are clearly defined and that determines where you are in terms of your performance, so that your supervisor can say, this is the rating I give you, this is where you need to improve, etc. And then you also need to know what other people think about what you're doing and whether you are valued in the organization. That is really important. And that's another very important contribution of feedback. It helps us to understand how we are valued in the organization. Most importantly is to know, are we performing to the level that the job requires or the specific output that is being measured? Important to know that we are meeting the requirements in terms of our organization. Now, depending on our experiences, is there anyone here that had negative experiences with feedback? Just put a yes, a Y in the chat box if any one of you experienced negative feedback or have a fear for feedback in your performance reviews. in the chat box, just give me an indication if any one of you feel, anyone. Anybody? Not a fear for feedback. Right. We should not be afraid of feedback. Because if we hear the word feedback, we normally interpret this as negative feedback. It depends on how the feedback is given. If it's given in a negative way and deconstructive manner, obviously we will have a fear for that. And based on our own experiences, if you had negative feedback or negative experiences in the past, you won't want to receive that feedback. Now, how do you overcome that? Firstly, you need to understand that feedback is important. And based on the slides that I just showed you, hopefully that will give you a perspective on why we say that it's important that you are open for feedback, because it makes you a better person in the organization and a more effective employee. So being open is a good thing. It's not all negative. In any discussion, there may be some negative aspects, but also positive things that come out of the performance discussion and your feedback sessions. And we need to work on both of those areas. It can help you grow and make you a better employee. Then we always think that if we go into the discussion, it's going to be feedback from the manager on how we're doing, and that's it. That should not be the case. The feedback session is a two-way process in which you can also share your ideas. It depends on the maturity of the relationship you have with your supervisor or your manager. And I encourage you to make a point that you show to your manager or supervisor that you are taking performance management seriously, and that you take the discussions about your performance seriously by providing them with facts, by engaging them in the day-to-day work, so that two-way conversations can actually take place. Many employees omit to do this. We have strengths and we have weaknesses. In so many instances, we go into a performance management discussion or a mid-year appraisal, and we want to be rated as an excellent performer. We need to acknowledge the fact that we have strengths and weaknesses, and we can't always perform perfectly. So if you acknowledge from your perspective that you also have weaknesses in your areas of work and that there are areas for improvement, it immediately opens up for a conversation, an honesty and a trustworthy relationship with your supervisors and your colleagues. Reframe the feedback. You may get feedback that you initially think is negative, and then only when you start thinking about it and see it from the organization perspective, that there are some valid points and maybe some strengths and weaknesses that you can work on. So don't just take it as it comes. And then by knowing how to provide feedback to others will also make you sensitive. If you are in a managerial position, it is a role that you must provide feedback to your employees. So it's a skill that needs to be practiced. And each individual has a different style to provide feedback. So learn the skills of feedback. If you know and feel confident on giving honest feedback to someone else, you will also become more open to receiving feedback, whether it's positive or negative, and know how to deal with that feedback, which we will discuss in the next slide. I used to go, before I went into a performance discussion, try and visualize what I would like to see at the end of this discussion, so that you can actually start scripting the discussion that will take place. So it requires you to prepare your own performance. And here it's important that we keep track of the things that we are doing. As employees, we have, if we go into a discussion, a mid-year appraisal, without any facts, any figures, any achievements. It's a blind discussion, and then it's not going to end up in a good way. So what I suggest is I keep an email folder. I used to keep an email folder of all the actions that were taken by the employees under their names. On an individual basis, I recommend you do the same. Once you've set your objectives at the beginning of the year, find ways that you can track and monitor your achievements according to those objectives. We call those things evidence. It's either soft evidence or hard evidence. Soft evidence is things that we can observe, but hard evidence are things that we can actually keep. Things like timesheets, things like financial statements that we've generated, things like presentations we have done, things like KPIs we have met against the organizational goals and objectives. All of those things are things that you can take with you. So once you know that your performance mid-year review is going to take place, identify which were the major objectives that you had to achieve, and then identify the evidence associated with each one of those. Then sit with yourself and be honest. To what extent did you meet or did not meet those objectives? So do a self-assessment. By the time you get into the discussion with your supervisor, you are fully prepared. You know where you've done well and where you have not done well. And I can promise you, the person will be surprised because it will enable you to go into the discussion and say, I've done and managed to achieve these things, but in these areas I found it difficult to achieve. These are the reasons. And then it becomes a two-way discussion. Prepare any questions in advance. Things like, how can I improve the performance? I have experienced these barriers. What do you suggest I do to overcome them? These things affected my performance to a certain extent. How can we do, what resources can I get in order to overcome them? So have your questions ready where you feel that you need further assistance. Also, you need to have questions ready about how you are doing, and we will discuss that in the next slide. Expressing your needs is very important. We sometimes assume the manager knows exactly what we are doing, what our needs are in the workplace, and we just keep on working without ever discussing what the needs are. Especially as far as personal development is concerned, as far as movement from one area to another is concerned. And then there is the sensitive issue about promotion and salary increases. Personally, I don't believe those topics should be discussed in your performance discussion. It's something that you can highlight as a topic for discussion, but I suggest you keep that as a separate discussion afterwards. The appraisal, the mid-year appraisal, is simply there to determine how you are doing in performance in terms of your performance. Are there any questions so far? I've seen there are some other people that joined us. Welcome to all of you. Anybody's got questions? If you want to ask questions, just unmute yourself and I'll try and answer those questions. Anything about performance management systems? Okay. So you would like to ask feedback. Very important that you decide beforehand, how long is it going to take? What type of feedback do you want? If you just want general feedback on how am I doing in terms of my performance, it's not a problem. It's something that can be discussed in a short period. But if you want to know how you are performing on a specific project, conducting specific tasks and activities, that is maybe something that should be done in a separate discussion. Remember, the mid-year appraisal is to determine, it's a pulse check to see how are we doing since we set our objectives in the beginning of the year and where we are. So details about what specific activities and tasks are allocated, how resources are being used, budgets that are needed and required, those are things that should take place in a meeting. General discussions about performance and the level of performance, those things can be tackled in your mid-year review. Be very specific. If you are just general in saying, how's my work, it's not going to really mean anything, and you're not going to get good constructive feedback. So if you want to get specific feedback, refer to specific events. In the project that we worked on for this construction company, you gave me the project to do this, 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 this. I executed these steps. How do you think I did in each one of these areas? Are there any areas that you would like me to improve? You get specific. So if your objectives are stated clearly in the beginning, it's possible to break it down into small activities and go back to your supervisor and say, how did I do in terms of these specific activities? Don't just ask, am I a good employee? Anybody can ask that question, and you're not going to get a very good, you're not going to get an honest answer. If I'm a good employee, can you please elaborate on the things that I'm doing well and the things that I can improve? That is more specific. There may be areas that you need to be improved, that you need to improve your performance, and that feedback you need to accept in a graceful manner. I understand the feedback that you've given. It's really valuable, and I believe I can do this and this and this and this to improve on that area. Really listen. When you get feedback, give attention. That means you have got an open posture, open body language. You've got eye contact with your supervisor, the person giving the feedback, and you can even make notes so that the person sees that you are taking it seriously. By showing interest in the feedback that you receive contributes to the level that you will be valued, because people will see that you are actually taking the work seriously and that you are taking the feedback seriously, especially if you are able to recognize that there are some areas you still need to work on. So my message is, don't go into a discussion and tell the supervisor, I'm wonderful and I've done everything right. We are all human beings. And the starting point for a performance discussion is, are you doing the job to the level required? Anything above that or better than that, if you can provide the evidence, that is something that you can discuss further and ask for higher reward and recognition. When you get feedback, thank the giver, whether it's positive or negative, because that helps you to improve. And so what you typically would say is, I've received, thank you very much for the feedback you've given. I can absolutely see where it fits into my day-to-day routines. And I think I can improve on these. So I really appreciate that you told me about that. I never knew. That shows impact. That shows that you are actually listening and that you are taking to heart what your manager or supervisor is providing. This is very important. Don't just accept feedback as it's given. If somebody gives you feedback, you have the right to say, can you please elaborate and give me an example of the actions that I've taken that maybe need improvement? Be more specific. Give me some examples. What would you do if you were in my situation? What would you recommend I do to increase the level of interaction? Or how can I provide more effective information? What tools are there that can assist me in performing better in this area? So ask for clarification and make sure that you actually take note of those things. Any questions? Please, people, it's interactive. Anyone got questions here? Just unmute yourself. If you have questions, unmute yourself and I will gladly answer your questions. Okay, let's move on. And then probe to understand. Sometimes you get feedback and you don't really understand, and you walk out and you go home and you don't know what exactly your supervisor actually meant. So you get the feedback. It is your right as an employee to say, please explain a little bit more. I do not understand exactly. Give me examples. So probe to understand, and repeat. So what you are saying is that I'm not performing well in providing accurate information, and that I am specifically need to improve my statistical skills when providing labor turnover numbers. That makes it specific. Then you wait for the confirmation from your supervisor, and you know that you understood it correctly. Many conflicts in the work situation is because of misunderstanding. The mid-year review is an opportunity for you to go sit down in allocated time, focused on you and your performance, to know exactly where you stand as an employee and what you can do to contribute more to the performance of the company. Any questions? Now, what types of questions? What questions can you ask during a performance review? The first question is, how am I progressing against the agreed goals? Now, if you ask this question, make sure that goals were agreed. And if your performance management system does not make provision for agreeing objectives at the beginning of the year, I strongly suggest that you have, in the beginning of a performance cycle, a discussion with your supervisor and manager. Look at your job description, the main components and outputs required from you, and then identify the goals for that specific year based on the organizational goals or departmental goals and objectives, so that it is very clearly specified. And then, of course, those goals need to be set in a smart way, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. That's the starting point. If you have those 5 criteria, you can then ask the question, how am I progressing against the goals? Because it's measurable. And you can go into a discussion. So it takes a bit of preparation. It's not just going into a discussion and getting information from your supervisor, and then at the end find out but the impression that he has and that you think you have of your performance are totally different. It should be a two-way communication process. Am I meeting expectations? We are all working at different levels in the organization. There are certain job requirements, and it's important for you to establish whether you are performing to the level required by the organization and by your supervisor. And also, based on the feedback from your team members, decide whether you are meeting the expectations in the team. Nothing wrong to ask, what are my strengths? To identify the areas where you contribute more. You may have strengths that are observed by other people and you don't know about. If you ask this question, you may discover that there are some areas you can assist your colleagues to do their job better, or that in which you can excel in the current position that you are, that may help you to develop and progress in your career. What are my areas for improvement? If you have the self-confidence to ask this question, it really illustrates your commitment in trying to do better and to develop yourself. And then any appraiser and anyone that engages with you will take you seriously. Remember, it's not a one-way process where you just get feedback from your supervisor. And if your supervisor or manager sees that you also want to improve yourself, they will acknowledge that accordingly. This happens all the time. And in many organizations, people work towards a specific goal. As the year goes along, that goal is changed, but the performance agreement is not changed. And then at the end of the year, they get into the discussion and there's a huge debate about whether they were told why they did not meet the objectives, and it gets into a conflict situation. It's important during the mid-year review to sit down and say, we've passed through the first 6 months. And once again, I don't want this to just be a discussion at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and the end of the year, because then you're still going to get surprises. I always encourage managers and supervisors to have weekly, daily, monthly discussions with their employees on how they are doing and to collect the evidence so that you know where you are and when goals or objectives need to be amended. A performance discussion is also about skills. You cannot achieve your objectives if you don't have the right skills. So it's almost a must that you also need to look at your skills currently, on what the requirements are in terms of the goals and objectives for the future, and make sure that you actually have those skills and abilities. If you don't, you need to acknowledge that in this discussion and determine ways on how you can address those skill requirements. You probably also have a competency framework. It's something that you can refer to. What are the competencies in your job description that are required in your current job? As technology is changing, there may be certain things that you need to learn. I mean, all of us had to learn about Zoom and using Zoom in the workplace, which we never knew. That's just a simple example. But make sure that if you have to engage in meetings on a regular basis, you know how to use the methodology. If there's a change in technology or the system, the computer system that you are you sufficiently trained to meet those objectives? Are there other areas where I can help the team succeed? This will mean a lot to your supervisor, especially now when people are under pressure. If you show that you are also willing to help your other colleagues in achieving their objectives, especially if you have additional skills that others don't have, please do that. I used to have a colleague that was really good in Excel, and he contributed enormously to the performance of other people by providing them with information when they needed them. He also trained those people on how to use the tool, the Excel application, and that helped the whole team to perform much better. How can I improve the contribution and growth of the department? There may be certain things, other skills that you have that can contribute to the department as a whole that you may not be doing right now. And what additional skills should I develop, as I mentioned earlier? Very important that if you want to do tasks and activities that are outside the scope of what you are currently doing, or within the scope and you don't have resources, that you also ask your supervisor or manager to make sure that you have the right resources to do the tasks at hand. So these are questions that you can ask during the performance review. Now, it's only normal. Our brain is a defense mechanism, and our brain tries to move away from threatening situations. And in the cases where we feel threatened, we tend to overreact emotionally, and we need to try and prevent that. And the way that you can do that is to remain calm. Once you get feedback that you perceive to be negative and you feel you want to move away from it or overreact, remain calm, take a few breaths, and try and absorb what is being said and understand the perspective from which it is given. Also, that's very important. The person that gives, sometimes it says more about the person that's giving the information. But if it's a person that you can really trust and that's really honest, remain calm and absorb the information first before you overreact and emotionally. Because if you get emotional and negative feedback, you will lose that discussion and you give the upper hand to the other person. Once it's negative and you don't really understand where this is coming from, repeat what the person has said. The feedback you have given me indicates that you don't like that I do this and this and this and this. Is my understanding correct? So that the person can affirm or say, no, that's not what I mean. I mean this or this or this. So Avoid misunderstanding and communication when you are doing feedback. When you're in a feedback session, it's very important that you make sure you get the right message. Clarify your understanding. And then also see it from both perspectives. Try and put yourself in the manager's shoes and try and let him understand from your perspective exactly how it's going. Move on politely. Once the feedback has been given, it may not have been very, very positive, may have been negative. It may have been a wake-up call. Appreciate and say, thank you very much. I take note of this and I will do my best in doing better next time. Okay, are there any questions? Anyone? As I said, we have a poll that I would like you to answer. Can you quickly answer this feedback poll that I just launched? There are a few questions about the session. Once you've completed the questions, you will receive that confirmation email of attendance. Just make sure you answer all the questions. Scroll down and answer all the questions. Thanks to Sane. Linia, thanks for attending. As I said, you will receive afterwards a confirmation email of attendance. Thank you very much for being here. I hope this helped. Thanks, Lakshmi. Thanks, Raja. Thanks, Amlinia. Have a great evening. It's only my pleasure.